not uncommon. Brian and I were talking about this. I mean, plenty of, I don't want to, generalize, but boys like to blow things up. I have a few in my life that like, boom, they like to go boom. And so what would you say, how do you channel that desire into something that's safe and productive? That's my question.
Yeah, that's a tough question because it's like I channeled it in a way that was, it was very destructive, and it wasn't at the times the safest thing, but it was always out of just pure excitement and joy of science and joy of the explosive nature of this stuff. It was never like I'm gonna go take out some property at school or I'm gonna, hurt somebody. No, it was always just this fascination. And I think, a lot of people who get into science are just generally fascinated by, the reactions that happen, whether it's chemical or, thermal, any kind of reaction. It's awesome. I don't know. It's pretty awesome.
You talked about getting to Mythbusters. That really spurred on like this new, almost like re-interest in science in a different way. It started spurred on that maker sort of mentality, that maker community, and even some of the STEM stuff that's going on now.
Yeah, no, it was one of those things where I feel like Mythbusters kind of had it was like a perfect storm, because there wasn't really a lot of programs out there that were science based, and it was science in a way, it was like teaching science in a way. And we never really set out to be a science show. We just set out to be a cool, entertaining show. But it started evolving into like throw in more science. Like we need more science to test these urban legends. And that hit this kind of like, it resonated in audiences because there was nothing really out there like it. And it was kind of like when the internet was kind of grown up now, like the internet before that wasn't that great. And it was like the early 2000s. So it was like 2002 or 2003 that the internet really started taking off, and all these stories started getting told online. So urban legends just kind of like blew up, it was like all these like, folklore and tales in it. And it just kind of was like a perfect time for Mythbusters to happen. Plus, it was also a time where like geeks kind of became like, to be a geek was a cool thing. It was like Comic-Con blew up, and all these Marvel, all these Marvel comic and DC comic movies were coming out, and it was becoming mainstream to be a nerd or a geek. So it was just kind of like the perfect storm of the time. And, for whatever reason, it took off.
I'm so glad you brought up that term nerd and geek, because my 6-year-old just asked me last night, Mom, what's a nerd? Am I a nerd? And I'm like, I'm like, first of all, I wish that's, I wish, but no, I said, nerds are really cool. I said, it is really cool. He's like, do they wear glasses? And I'm like, no, that's just what they show you on TV. Like nerds are the people doing the cool stuff out there. I'm like, so you want to be a nerd, and I like that it kind of gives a new spin to that. What used to be a negative, it had a negative connotation, it's really cool to be a nerd.
Well, it's like you look at all the people who are, programming and creating all these websites, like, Facebook, YouTube, it's like they were all programming nerds, it's like it's like that it was like people who were into computers or, into studies, whatever. And it was like, oh, you're lame. And it's like, oh, guess what? Now they're running the world.
Yes. Right. I think what happened too is the term nerd or geek, it became like whatever you were really focused on, like you could be a geek or a nerd on almost like any topic, it sort of evolved over time, right? Because originally it was just like, oh, geeky, book smart, like that's what a nerd was, right? Where you could sort of be a nerd on any given topic. It doesn't matter whether it's cool, uncool, you're sort of like nerding out on whatever that is or geeking out on it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think it evolved the term too.
And it's crazy to see how like Comic-Con is just a good example, because it's like, it was this kind of small event where once a year they would take over a hotel room or a couple of rooms, whatever, and people would trade their comic books. And, you know, until the pandemic, it was like one of the biggest events of the year and it was like not just San Diego, but you had them all over now, right?
Yeah, I was trying to get tickets last year.
And you see Hollywood, the mainstream Hollywood and all entertainment outlets are just dying to get in because they're spending so much money. So it's interesting to see how this kind of little subculture has just blown up into the mainstream.
No pun intended there, Tory. But, you know, and we're talking about makers and science, you know, and I know, Brian, this is a big question you had too. You know, so we deal a lot with the engineering community and the maker community. And so, you know, what would you say now, fast forwarding and going through all of these things that you've now been through on your journey, what would you say to the young makers out there, you know, who are kind of just tinkering and, you know, they don't know if they want to do something else with it? You know, what's your advice to them?
I would say just, you know, get your hands dirty and make stuff. I mean, just do it. Like, you know, my dad, he had a wood shop in our garage growing up. And I remember, you know, being a little kid, having to get a stool to, you know, step up to use the bandsaw. And, you know, it used to freak my mom out because it's like, all you need to do is like hit that saw blade and your finger's gone. But it was a good learning experience for me because it taught me how to respect the tool and be super careful. And having my dad there to kind of watch over and make sure I was doing things properly gave me the skills that I still use today, you know, and I feel like so many people nowadays are so worried about their kids getting hurt or, you know, which is smart, but you know, it's like, it's a different time. Like the stuff, you know, I was doing as a kid, nowadays you'd be like, what, you can't let your kid do that. Yeah. So I would just, you know, say, try to supervise, but let your kids do some dangerous stuff.
Right. You talk about safety, but you know, also the creativity in it, right? Being creative and being innovative with it, you know, after you lay those foundations of being able to use the tools becomes really important, you know, in discovery.
Yeah. I mean, I've worked on shows where I, you know, handed this guy a cordless drill and he's literally looking at it like, what do I do with it? Like he had no idea how to use it. And I was just like, whoa, there's like, we've lost, like there's a generation that's lost skill sets almost. And I'm not saying everybody, but it was like over the last few years working on certain shows where we're building stuff. It's like, I'm seeing little by little, it's like, oh, wow. Like you know, this younger generation, they didn't grow up using tools. They were playing video games or, you know, working online or whatever.